going to believe it. Series 2. Whoop, whoop.
We're back. We're back.
We're surprised as much as everybody else is that we've got 15 episodes or 14 and a half in the bank.
Yep.
And we're on to Series 2, Episode 1.
I know.
There we go.
I'm excited. I think our heads just got so full of things to talk about. We're like, we'll have to do Season 2. But knowing us, will still meander from the topics that we originally spoke about doing in Season 2. But
Of course. So what's been keeping you busy?
So lots of things, actually. So besides getting married and doing all the personal development stuff on one side, you know, that just like real life stuff. Yeah, just like that. I have been designing, so in the kind of curriculum development stages of some programs for UK coaching. And that has been really interesting to look at, like, the evaluation side of that. So what do we want to get out of it? What, from our perspective, what might the coaches, how do you advertise it? We're now going from a really long program to shorter intervention style program. So getting our head around that and the space learning that we would have had in the other program. So a lot of thinking, planning, exciting. The female leadership programs, they have just gone pew. So again, UK coaching stuff, we had a meeting and all of a sudden loads of people are interested. But the lovely part of that is it isn't here's a box of a program, take it and run with it. It's like, what do you need? Express your interest, do a little health check. And that's the part that's really cool. So people feel supported. And that is always the lens, you know me, I'm always having that, like, the relationship side. So I got onto this program, this supporting coaches in high performance program. And we had 2 days of field work. It was virtual field work. So it was field work. But it was really nice to have we went into subgroups, to have 4 people in a room and chat about coaching. So we watched an hour of a session together and unpicked it. So I can tell you more about that later, but there's some of the things that have been exciting that's going on. Some stuff at West Ham with players and movement of pieces of the puzzle. But yeah, all kind of a transitional period for me, really. How about you?
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, lots going on.
Yeah. Well, I guess for me, I've been on the grass a lot, which is cool, and lots of like kind of conversations like this with coaches at the football club. We've had the first team back in, and we've got a placement student. Well, she's not a student; she's finished her master's now. Who's doing some kind of human movement physiology type programs for us that we're kind of starting to explore. That's pretty interesting and quite complex in the sense that there's lots of moving parts for her, for us, for the players, etc. So that's quite good, and lots of conversations with the coaches. So last night watched 2 hours of the under 10s coaches delivering. That was really interesting, and my favourite line from the whole thing was Lawrence, the coach, just saying, I'm just a builder. I played a bit of football, but I'm just a builder.
Interesting.
And then just starting to explore then, well, you know, he wants to really help the kids, but how do we help the kids? And, you know, he's reached out because he felt that he was running out of ideas, which I think is not uncommon probably for lots of coaches. You know, what do you do when you run out of ideas? So starting to look at that and, you know, just started playing around with his session while it was going on, which was like, you know, him and Ivan, the other coach, really kind of just open-minded. And, you know, I ended up having conversations with kids about chess, like mid-session. So I'll tell you how that happened then.
Please do. That was my question.
So they were doing a little shooting practice in a football context. And we'd already kind of moved some parts to make it look a bit more like the game. And they were really, you know, comfortable to explore what it looked like. And there was one kid who was basically, they received the ball from different places, received it in a square, had a touch and had a shot. And then we brought a defender in and kind of scaffolded it a bit. And this lad, not played football for very long, technically not great, but his first touch was brilliant. Every time he had a touch, it's wherever he received the ball from, he did a great job in setting himself to play forwards. But after that, the next part wasn't, there was he didn't really get many shots in, missed opportunities to shoot, etc. And so when he was stood on the side passing, I just walked up and went, do you know what? Your first touch to be able to play forwards is awesome. I said, I don't know many kids that can do that like you do. I said, I think it's really good. However, we've got to help you now get better at the next bit in taking the opportunities to shoot. And he's 9, this kid. And he said, well, I do struggle to observe the moments to take the shot. And I've gone, oh, okay, right. Well, this is not the normal 9-year-old conversation I'm used to. So, okay. So I said, well, what do you observe? And this was then the highbrow conversation.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I would equate this to a game of chess. And in the sense that if I had moved the queen over here, I could maybe attack down this way to go for checkmate across the. I said, right. I said, so what does that look like in a football sense? So if the defender, Ethan, is the queen and you've moved him with your first touch, where would that mean you can attack? Oh, well, I could attack in the opposite space to try and score if that's checkmate down the. I said, brilliant. I said, so see the game as a game of chess and try and move the defenders to help you get checkmate.
Gosh, that's amazing.
Yes, I should try that.
That's amazing.
Which was a very different conversation I'd had with one of the other kids.
Yeah, all right, I'll do it.
But yeah, it was really interesting. Just, I mean, thankfully the conversation didn't go too far because my chess analogies would rapidly dry up.
You sounded very well there, I must say.
Yeah. But I wonder how much as coaches are we able to get in stream very quickly with things that kids say, their view of the world. How often do we ask them what their view of the world is and draw analogies to different things?
Pause moment. Amazing. I think that's, the development of when we discussed, and probably coaches in general have heard the term understand the individuals or the people in front of you. I think that's the nitty gritty. It's like be in their shoes without coaches feeling like they need to have the same lingo or live in the same borough or all that. It's just, how are they seeing that situation and what language am I using? And I know that I've had conversations with coaches who go, oh, I know what's happening in school with them. Brilliant. That's a good, rich relationship conversation.
Yeah.
Or if they've shared something, that means you're creating a space for them to do that. I'm not saying that's not wrong or right, but you have a scenario here where you've almost had your finger on the pulse of the question, and then you're reading the answer back and going, okay, hang on now, I've got to shift my language here. Or me saying, like, yeah. Smooth up here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, the queen over there.
Yes, yeah, and the rook can get down.
But you know what I mean? Like if I, even with my sister, like, can't remember what it was, but about 6 months ago, we were talking about, she uses process maps all the time. And maybe it was thinking about the wedding or something like that. And she was like, well, why don't you just do one of these? And she whips up this thing. And I'm like, what? No, put it away. She's like, but it's just simple. It's just this, 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 and this. And until we had that conversation, I realized that she was the wrong sister I went to for that. I should have went to the other one. But no, it's like, it's kind of understanding what they're seeing in front of them. And then what is it that's relatable in that instance? I love that. Yeah. So, okay, what if the coach doesn't know chess?
Well, I mean, I probably know enough how to play a game, but I guess if I knew nothing, I would just ask him to explain it to me. Yeah. And I think my initial question, I came away and I was quite pleased with my initial question when he said, well, I don't observe the moments, or however he kind of phrased it, very, very well spoken. And I said, well, what? Tell me about what you are observing, because from where I was standing, I had a very different view of what was happening to him, and he was seeing things in a very different way. So I think that kind of just opened the door to the conversation, of which he definitely did most of the talking anyway. But because I was interested in what his perspective was, because it would have been different to mine. And I think sometimes as coaches, we're very quick to jump in, and that I'm certainly seeing this now from a lot of the coaches that I watch. Very quick to jump in and tell the kids what they should have done differently. Yeah.
Yeah.
In football jargon, like, keep it out here, knock it out this way, and I think it's it's a very easy jump to make.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And there is that across all age groups, because I mean, I don't know, I couldn't tell you how many hours of stuff I've watched over COVID from a virtual space with coaches. But what we do tend, because I'm not there getting the feel of it and all that kind of data, I'm listening and fine tuning the questions and the interactions and the language they use. And it's the silence that I always listen for, not that we're all walking mutely from A to B, but how do we hold that silence and let them digest what you're saying and for a second process it and be okay in that. And the other part of it is that urgency to keep going through something. We've talked about it, momentum in a session and transitioning through sessions, but actually to stop while they're moving from A to B and just see where things are at. And if things aren't working, shifting, back to those things that we've said in kind of season 1 in different episodes, is like, if you get to a point where this kid is seeing things in chess and moving things around, if we're not relating anything to him and everything's going over his head, and like we think of cognitive load, 5 to 7 or 9 pieces of information, but he has 15 and it's all in language he doesn't understand, that session mightn't be enjoyable, or he's really struggling to get the enjoyment out of it by himself as opposed to being nourished through no fault of the coach in most instances.
So really interesting phrases in there. So you talked about cognitive load. So I guess, what do you mean by that? And how much information do we think we can provide with before we overload?
Yeah, so I've read a couple of books recently, because I know I have a lens on that, and I do talk about language and communication. So I wanted to make sure I had enough information. A lot of it comes from education, the initial research around it. But essentially what we're looking at is the transfer of information from long to short-term memory, and how much information you can hold, and then what we store, and how we kind of retrieve from storage, and all those mechanisms that happen in between. That's essentially all of that encompassed. But around the information that we have and that's present, like they say, there's a number of pieces of information that somebody can take on, and then it's what kind of environment, how relevant it is to them while they're in that space. So what I've become very mindful of myself personally, even talking to my sister's kids who are 5 and 4, or any adults or interactions, I might say, before I might go, how are you doing, what's going on, 3 questions all in one. Or the kids, I'll say they went to do Camogie, the Irish long stick shinty thing.
Oh,
yeah, so it's the female version of hurling. I don't know why they split
wow.
up. I should know the history of that. But anyway, the girls' version is camogie, helmet on, long stick, ball, pick it up on the ground and hit it. Kind of like shinty, the Scottish shinty version. So anyway, they went to that for the first time, and they're 5. I was so excited. Now, it's not basketball, because they're not allowed to do basketball till they're 6, but 5, up in a field, ball and hurl and play an array. That's it. How'd you go? What happened? Tell me. I was so excited. I asked her 5 questions. And I was like, damn it. And I was like, did you have fun? Who was there? What did you wear? And slowing it down. And I know I'm being real simplistic there, but in a video I watched earlier in the week, you had a coach coaching some athletes on the other end, like the elite level of the spectrum. And it was short bursts, and they all had an understanding of what that word meant. So I know we talked about cues and triggers before, but even in the first part of the session, they did a walk, and they talked about what was going to happen on the course. So they did a whole walk with the coach, and that got me thinking about, like, when you come into a session and you gather, I'm thinking invasion sport now, or even when I've done some British cycling or triathlon stuff, how often do you walk the course or walk from A to B with the athletes, and kind of almost get into the session? You're warming up your mind as well as going from here to the cones or here to wherever. And you get a load of information in, but then you go back to the bite-sized chunks, and where recall is necessary and useful for the session, retrieval is useful. You might use that. but just very mindful of the amount of pieces of information that you're giving out, and the type of questioning that you're asked to kind of consolidate or get a clarity on where they're at with it. I've rambled there, but there's some thoughts on that topic. But happy to.
Yeah, how do you think that changes with age or stage of development?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think what one area that I've zoomed in before is I've in the analyst roles that I've visited like numbers of dress. I spent more time in dressing rooms, I think, than I have on pitches. But the amount of information that people are able and willing to process, it's just the language that plays a part to it. So I still do think, say, if I am at West Ham and they're in a professional space, and I'll be encouraging coaches to really identify what the key messages are, let the athletes try and come up with those, and the solution going into halftime, and how emotion plays a part of that, versus what you were saying earlier on, that the coach has this urge to kind of support them and fill in all the gaps for them. So I think it's the understanding of the words and how quickly you might jump to your knowledge versus their knowledge of it. Or you might go to the problem solving. So I'd like to say, and I would definitely be shot down if I said that there was a very strong similar thread there, because it does have a massive difference. But actually, I do believe that if you take the words and simplify them and the message, that it can be really impactful, or you support them in trying to understand it. You spoke in one of our episodes about a halftime and getting your Fulham players, I think it was, to share what they were seeing and feeling. And they may not articulate themselves, where that could be the difference in the age. They're able to articulate what they're feeling and seeing.
Yeah.
They might be able to solve the problem quicker and snappier. But on the whole, from a coaching angle, I think it's the simplicity of the message and the amount of information.
I think an interesting point you talked about, sort of the language, is I think I kind of see it that, a shared understanding of language across the players and the coaching staff, horizontally within that age group. But I think it's then how you then factor that into a club or a collection of teams through a pathway, through an experience. So then all coaches are talking about the same language, regardless of where you're at. I think that's definitely got to be where we've got to try and get to.
Yeah, that's a brilliant point. And it sparked when I went down to a football club a few years ago. We were doing a workshop down there, and we had some great interactions. And we had 20 people in a room. And I asked the coaches from each phase how often they interact. And they said, oh, yeah, we do. We chat all the time. But actually, when we unpicked it, they didn't. They didn't, where it meant around what you were saying there, around those key things of not saying that everyone needs to be robotic and lose their personality, but words that kids are spending in 2 years or a year in a certain portion and transitioning, like they're now having different coaches who are speaking different. They may try and keep the DNA or the technical stuff similar, but yeah, aligning language to help with the execution and understanding of that, I think is can be really useful and really impactful.
Yeah, definitely. Well, and maybe that's something that we can unpick as we go through this series.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited for you that you're on the grass. Really excited.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's going to give me lots of live examples, along with my son having now had his first proper game.
Was that brilliant? Tell us a little. Be a dad. Go on, tell us.
Just filled with pride although he's just a 6-year-old, and then people just say to me, oh, well, is he going to be good because he's your son and you've worked in football? No, he's a 6-year-old. There's absolutely no guarantees. And he was playing in his second game, so they're 2 little 20-minute games, and he volunteered to play in goal in the second game for a half, mainly because I think they were rotating around, but he'd put his hand up and said he'd play goal. So I'm like, cool. And the ball was down the other end, and he was stood on his goal line, practicing his dabs. Ball 30, 40 yards away from him, and he's practicing his dabs. So that was good. So that was his highlight. But I think the best bit for me was, so my wife was there as well. But the best bit for me was my dad came.
Oh.
So, my dad's 74, bad knees, just cut, and he's got to walk like 80 yards across the pitch, or the pitches, to get to where we're playing right at the bottom. But the fact that I think me and my dad can then see Callum playing football, and Callum's loving it and enjoying it. That was it was a really nice memory for me, I think.
Oh, that is absolutely fabulous. That is really lovely.
Yeah.
And it's a different, I mean, I'd love to know how Cal felt about ye being there, and then how ye felt, you're filled with pride and you can have a conversation. And maybe he's just living in the dad moment, like, oh, look at all these people here to watch me. This is so cool, where yours like, oh my God, my son, It's funny.
Wouldn't have registered it on that level.
But
no. And standard thing, they lost the second game quite heavily. The other team, physically bigger, and again, this is something we might get into. Physically bigger. But at the end of the game, he was off behind the other goal, playing football with a couple of the other kids.
Oh wow, amazing.
Irrelevant, really, that whatever the score was. He scored a cracking own goal in that game as well.
But we'll still put it down as a goal. We'll put it down as a goal. Great touch.
No, he came off and he said, "Oh yeah, I scored 2." One of them was in the wrong end, mate. That one doesn't count.
A goal is a goal, Dad. A goal is a goal.
but he had a great time, and he's looking forward to going again. So I'm sure some stories will come out as we kind of start to unpick what that looks like for some of the little kids, as much as we're both kind of working with some grown-ups in this process as well. So yeah. And as per normal, there's notes about what we were going to talk about. No.
What a lovely note to finish on, though. What a lovely note to finish on. So I think that gets the ball rolling. Episode 1 nailed. We'll see us next week for episode 2 at Coach Convo. We're back on the Twitter handle. I got it right first time. coachconversation@gmail.com. You can see the email below. Join us, email us. We have had, in between seasons, we've had some people send in some suggestions that we've put on the list. So hold tight for those. Knowing us, we'll start with them with great intentions and we'll meander like we usually do. So, but why not? That's what this is for. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed season 1 and you're getting ready for season 2 with us. See you next week. Have a good week. Bye.
Bye.